Let me talk from the context of Zambia and see how we relate that to the African continent and I think to the global community. First and foremost, it's very important that we have civil society involvement in what we do in our countries. For us that are in public office, running public affairs, it is critical that we partner in some way or another with the civil society, the broader civil society with all its various components in it. Criticism is part of it, really, is not the issue. The issue is to work together for what? To improve the lives of citizens in our individual countries where we operate as civil society, where we operate as governments. That's the reason we occupy those roles, those functions, is to do something that overall help improve the quality of life for our people. For us, for me, and the government, our government, New Dawn government, we're very clear about that. So our intent is to do just that. And we were elected on the platform of change, change to better the people's lives. And we also understand that it's almost impossible to deliver change unless we do two sides of the equation, the same equation, and manage them rightly. One side is to ensure that we are able to deliver development, the economy. The economy is crucial. If you're talking about improving the welfare of the people, the economy can never be considered second fiddle, because that's what creates the ability to deliver better lives for our people, be it education for the young people, as we've done in Zambia, to basically make education available to all up to grade 12. Keep the girl child in school longer. And we know why we should do that. Obviously, it doesn't mean eliminating the boy child, but also to care, before I move away to that, to ensure that the kids go to college. And when they go to college, after college, quality education, they can get job opportunities. And for me, from the private sector, from my experience, my sins of the past, they ought to get business opportunities overall. And then the obvious things to take care of the weak, the poor. I hate that word, the poor, but those that are disadvantaged. Issues of gender, issues of the old people, the retired people. As some of you may know, in our country, people retired 20 years ago, never got their benefits. In 1 year in office, we've been able to pay the outstanding retirement benefits to all our people who deserved it. One or two may be coming through, that's normal. That's extremely important. We can continue the issues of nutrition, issues of, if you like, sanitation, water, issues of, all of those are importantly crucial, not just to those in government, but to those in the civil society as well. Otherwise, what is your agenda as civil society? I don't think there's anything else. The issues of human rights come in there, because really, access to opportunity is a human right, isn't it? Access to opportunity is a human right. So I will return just a little bit on that because time is not with us. Now, the other side of the equation for us is a prerequisite, an essential ingredient to allow us to run the economy better. What is that? For us, from the Zambian context, and I think Africa as well, we've seen the issues around the absence of the rule of law in many of our countries. We experienced that ourselves. I used to argue just 18 months ago that I needed a passport to go to another region of my own country because I was not allowed. The freedom of movement, assembly, association. I think it's important, as it is for the civil society, but for those of us in public office and government, to ensure that we have the rule of law and rights, liberties, and freedoms are respected for all our people, without exception. I think that's our agenda. And you'll see, and I argue that that has an effect on the economic side of the agenda, of the question. There's no question about it. The more freer people are, the more entrepreneurial are they likely to be, given other conditions, opportunity, and other things. And we are working in Zambia very hard to restore the rule of law. And that goes, I must say, Madam Samantha, to the dislike of some of our members, political party members, who thought that once we assume office, they will now do what those we replaced were doing. Unacceptable. And I've made it very clear to my own party colleagues that if you go and create trouble in the markets, you extort money from a widow who has 8 children, and she feeds her children from the market by extorting money from her, reducing her ability to trade freely, you find me standing in front of you. That's not easy to do to your own party members. It sounds easy. It's not easy. It's a very difficult proposition because populism tend to take the order or the space in the queue. So those are issues that the civil society must pay attention to governments like ours. That before we took office, no one from our party could wear patrigaria in a public place, at a bus stop, at a market, even in the office of a civil society organization. You couldn't, unless you want to commit suicide. It's not a joke. And like it's a flash of a second, before we were even sworn in, once we were declared winners, after days of pulling legs, refusal to give office, to hand over office, we made a pronouncement that the rule of law will apply, freedoms will apply, and that was the end, even before we got the instruments of power. Leadership is key in public office, in the civil service, in the civil society, to do the right things for the agenda we choose or we chose to represent to better the lives of the people overall. That's the issue here. And today, the colleagues that used to basically wage weapons of all kinds against our members, if you wore a red T-shirt, then it's trouble. They wear green T-shirts. They can wear green anywhere, anywhere, and no one will attack them. That's important. It's extremely important. Those freedoms are important. I also want to say that the issues of corruption are central to the civil society, but you should not be surprised that you have partners in a government like ours, that in the fight against corruption, which in our country and in a number of African countries damages the economy, takes away resources from people, for us, madam, increased our debt position to an unsustainable level. And from my training, the balance sheet is 2 sides. We borrow more money, there must be a compensating asset. In our country, we borrowed more money, the asset went down, the gap grew. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand there's a problem here. And so therefore we're determined to fight corruption, and we like the civil society in our country, in our region, and indeed elsewhere, to work with us in this agenda. Because I must say, in our country, because of polarization over years, and I see that trend in other African countries, where a genuine fight against corruption is abused to mean political victimization. And the civil society must be very careful not to fall in that trap, because you are protecting the rights of the other politicians. No. Public resources belong to the public. public, private to the private, and we protect both. That's the issue. You will also be delighted to know that in our country, once we took office, we made it very clear to our own party that there will be separation between the party in terms of assets, in terms of revenue, and the government. In the previous government, the two were clubbed together. And that's why we had such a runaway corruption situation. Again, it takes leadership to say that to your own members. There's a little bit of ugly scenes out there, but for me, it's an unquestionable situation that we must not even have debates around it. Again, we invite the civil society to acknowledge, if not to note, that major difference which helps to slow down corruption. I don't want to say too many more things. I think I've set the stage by saying there's a component tied to the rule of law, tied to human rights, tied to corruption fight, tied to many other things. It's governance, good governance. Good governance. It's extremely important that us who are running public offices understand that if we don't run our countries properly, prudently, fairly, and the institutions are not there to protect even the weak, we could have a problem, a very serious problem, which could lead to what we don't want. And that's the issues around basically peace, security, and stability, which is very important. I think I have said a lot of things here, but all I want to suggest to the group here is that we, as leaders on the continent now, are concerned about the threat on democracy, the increasing extremism on our continent, the increasing intolerance on our continent, coupled with economic difficulties arising from COVID-19, yes, but the difficulties were there before COVID-19. That's the truth. That's the truth. We saw it ourselves in Zambia. But also the issues around absence of economic opportunities, driving young talent, African talent across the Mediterranean. It's something we're concerned about. So it's important for us to protect democracy. It is important for us to do what is right all the time as leaders. If I give you an example of the COVID vaccinations in our country, when we took over, it was only 3%. In 1 year, we've taken to 80%. It's not that we have the money, it was leadership. That leadership is required to tame the extremism, temptations that are increasing. It's a difficult thing for certain leaders like myself to say so. But really, instability anywhere has the potential to destabilize any other place on the globe. We've seen that in Ukraine and Russia war, which was increase the cost of food for us, increase the cost of fuel, cost of fertilizer, inhibiting our ability to manage the macro issues. For us, that was priority number one, to manage macro issues. Inflation, too high, 24%, we've dragged it down to 9.8 in 1 year. And several other variables, foreign exchange market stability. These are important aspects, but the context of what I'm saying, Madam Samantha, is the issue of ensuring that the aspect of peace, stability, human rights, governance, a group of all of those are combined with the economic opportunity. Then we have the ability to provide the rights that our people need, the young people, all of that stuff, where I started from.
I'm a king, yes, I'm a king, I think I'm a king,